I've been calling her, so I guess we'll see.
No. Your dad. Is he
Oh
coming?
no, he's not going to be able to make it tonight.
Okay.
So just make sure. Can you guys all hear me fine?
I can.
Okay, just making sure because I've been trying to get better at this stuff, but I got um, Facebook Live, YouTube, and you guys on right now, so it's probably a little bit
Oh,
maxing out my computer, So just making sure the audio is still working good.
That's good.
All right, so
What's that keep popping up in there?
it's all the other things I'm trying to do.
I tried to Google my phone today. I got it to play, but I didn't have the volume up, and I couldn't listen to the gospel music. But I heard a little bit of it. But I got to learn how to turn up my phone when I pull up Google for gospel music, because I want to listen to gospel music. So I pulled it up, and it went through, but the music was very low.
Right.
I had to put it to my ear.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, well, maybe I'm missing the earpieces or something that got connected to the telephone.
Right.
And then I would hear it better.
Right.
But I wanted to, just lay it on a table and listen to it in my apartment.
Right.
But I couldn't get that far, so I got to try it again.
There you go. Yep. All right. So anything anything new with you guys? As far as all
Just
the
cold out here. Still cold here.
I wanted to ask everybody, how was their Easter? Was
Yeah.
it good?
Yeah. Ours was good. I mean, it was obviously different, but we
Yeah.
had service from my house and put up a message from that Art had pre-recorded, and
Okay.
let's see, we played outside during the afternoon. We went. Do you know the Bertles? I don't know. I always ask because they seem to know a lot of people. Matt and Rachel Bertles. He's a pastor in New London at another church, and I've been going down with them downtown at the parade, which is where the statue is downtown New London, and they have a permit for us to preach down there. So on Sundays from 3 to 5, we're down there and we can use amplification and everything. And so it's been a great opportunity. You'd be surprised, even at this time and even when it's cold and stuff, there's always somebody, the people always around, the train station's right there and stuff. So we did that. It was, what a great day, like perfect setting to be able to be out in the public square preaching, on Easter. So yeah, it was good. We did like a last minute makeshift treasure hunt in our house with the girls, and they loved it. They were like, "This is the best Easter ever," So,
That's good.
yeah. How about you?
I went with Pastor Lamont and his wife to our piano or organ player. He hosted like a little small gathering at his house. So it was Pastor, his wife, the organ player, and then myself. They all invited me over, and we kind of had like I don't know if you call it traditional kind of Easter dinner, but we had lamb and
nice,
a bunch of vegetables. It was kind of all over fellowship. It was pretty nice.
Yeah. Is that Royden?
Yeah. Royden, yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't know
okay.
you knew his name.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if he played piano. I always know him as a piano, not organ, but.
Oh, well, yeah, piano, organ.
Yeah.
He can play both.
Yep. How's it going out there in Colorado? You guys, is everybody back to work and stuff yet or no?
Talking to me?
Yeah. Well, I think you're the only one in Colorado. Yeah, that's right, Utah.
Yeah. Well, my husband and I both retired, but I'm just in the process of selling a house today because I'm a realtor.
Mm-hmm.
So just selling it for somebody who lives in Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
So
nice.
Yeah.
We're at in Connecticut.
He lives in Stonington, my nephew.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right
Yeah,
down the
most
road.
of my relatives live right around there by Lene.
Right.
You know, we all grew up on Lantern Hill Road, and
Okay, yeah.
I went to tap dance school out there in New London, where it was a real hood. It was a scary place, but I hear it's really nice there now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm saying the right thing calling it a hood, but
Yeah, we live in what I guess would be considered the hood, but it's all good. The hood is all good, I guess.
London.
yeah, I actually have pictures of when Lene was a little girl, and I'm 10 years older than her, and her and me and my stepsister, half sister, at a dance recital there.
Yeah.
That we often put on Facebook. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah. So I miss New England. I go there quite often when I can. So
Right.
I want to move back to the beach.
Yes. I was just, I don't know, I forget what I was talking about with somebody, but I was thinking, you know, if you're born and raised in the mountains, I'm sure you always want to go back to the mountains, but I don't know, there's something about the ocean. It's just, you got to be there.
Is that where you're originally from?
For the most
you
part,
from
I mean,
there?
since I was like 12, you know, but even before that, I was kind of around in the summers and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, anyways, all right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I was just waiting a little bit to see if Lene would come on, but not hearing anything. So, let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll get into it.
Okay.
Father, we thank you again for the opportunity to be able to meet like this. Thank you for your wisdom and how you are working in the world right now to bring people together that otherwise wouldn't have been together, and in ways that we wouldn't have thought. And we know that your ways are perfect. And thank you, Father, for putting this class together at this time. And I know there's a lot of people that are asking questions right now about why. And we just looking out at the world, we know that there's so much that you cannot trust, and so much uncertainty and different things we're hearing from people, and real suffering and pain going on. And so thank you that we can just take a moment and really every day, just right now, be able to look to you as the rock of ages and the eternal, like the bookends that you hold all the books, you hold them all up on the shelf, and you hold our lives together. You hold history together. You have everything right on track right now. And so I just thank you for the fact that we have you at this time. And I pray that as we look at the story of Joseph, as we think about Jesus and think about who you are, that you would open up this story to us and that we would be able to apply it to us today. Give us understanding of your word. Give us, each one of us, specific applications that we can make. And just pray for everyone who may be watching right now, that you would bless each person, that you be pleased and glorified. Guide our minds and our hearts right now. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Young man, I didn't get your name. I
Greg.
didn't get your name.
Craig.
The young man there. You.
Craig.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Oh, Michael.
Oh, okay. You guys haven't met yet.
No, I haven't.
So this is Craig with me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Church.
It's Craig.
Craig.
Yeah.
I don't see Craig.
Craig is right there.
I see a couch.
I guess the couch is.
There's Craig over there.
That's great.
And Michael, where are you from?
I live in Connecticut with Pastor, but I'm from Florida originally.
Oh, nice. I used to live in Florida. Where in Florida?
West Palm Beach.
Oh, nice. I'd like to go back there and live too. So, yeah.
Beaches.
And have you guys been watching The Chosen?
No, I've seen that,
You
but
heard
no.
of it?
I heard of it, but no.
Yeah, it was quite a presentation. We watched it all.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, maybe I'll look it up afterwards.
We have 2 questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so Genesis chapter 37 is where the story of Joseph begins, and just so I'm aware, how familiar are you guys, and Craig, how are you guys with the story of Joseph?
I know it a little bit.
Okay.
Mhm.
I've read it like twice, to be honest.
Okay.
It's been a
All right.
while.
Yeah. All right. So you know that you got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Joseph, right?
Yeah.
And the long story short, right, is that Joseph gets sold into slavery, and through a long series of unfortunate events, he ends up becoming Pharaoh's right-hand man. This is in the time of the Egyptian Empire. So this is when Egypt was the deal, had the most power. And Pharaoh is put at the right hand of Joseph was put at the right hand of Pharaoh, and ends up basically saving the world through the famine that came. And Joseph was there to deliver the people. And the end of the story of Joseph is that his brothers come to him, and they're afraid that he's going to kill them for what they did. But he ends up saying, what you meant this for evil, what you did, but God meant it for good, to bring it to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. So as we kind of survey the story and draw some things out, we can apply the big point that we're making tonight, is that Joseph went through some terrible, terrible things that he did not deserve. Well, we'll clarify that, but all of his suffering was not because of linked specifically to bad things that he did, and yet through it all, it ended up turning for the best for him, for his brothers, for his family, and for the whole entire world. So, we've been discussing those different things, but this is a big picture story of, our lives are not just me and the little time that I have here on the earth. It's much bigger than me right now, and it fits into a multi-generational plan that God is working on, right?
I agree.
Yeah. Amen.
I agree.
All right, so that's the overview. We'll start to go through it. And again, if you have any any input, go ahead and just interrupt me. So, all right, so Genesis 37. If you look in verse number 1, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob, Joseph being 17 years old and feeding the flock with his brethren. They were shepherds, right? And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So it's starting to lay the groundwork here about Joseph's relationships with his brothers was not good. Joseph was, kind of seems to be presented as a goody two-shoes, and the brothers were a rough bunch, and Joseph didn't have any problem telling on his brothers to his dad for the things that they were doing.
Which you're supposed to do anyways.
Yeah, okay. Verse 3, now Israel interchanges Israel and Jacob, same guy. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So if you're familiar with the background of the story of Jacob, you know that the family had some major issues. Jacob ended up stealing the birthright from Esau. There was much jealousy going on, in same with Abraham, right? Abraham, he had issues. When you think of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the family, it wasn't like the perfect family. They had some serious issues, all right? So you have Jacob here now showing favoritism, right, to this one son, the son being a goody two-shoes, telling on his brothers, and he makes him a coat of many colors. Many times it's presented as literally a coat of like different colors, which it could have been, very well could have been. But some people also say that this kind of signified like a coat of notoriety, or like a coat of honor. That like how you got the military, you put the all the
The brothers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, kind of like that idea, right? So it was an obvious favoritism that Jacob was showing to this son. So this isn't a good situation here. You know, the brothers were very jealous of Joseph.
Trouble's brewing.
And so what I want to point out right here is that the things that are about to go down in Joseph's life, as far as his family goes, is not something that he asked for, right? And how many times nowadays, right? How many times do people go into situations where they're suffering and they blame it on their family, right? Could have been something that happened to you when you were younger. You know, it could have been the way that your parents were, you know, the liberties they gave to you, or the situation that you were in, you know, not having, you know, where you were raised, that your upbringing, you know, however it maybe as you're older. And a lot of times people will blame their problems on their family, not themselves, and just stop there. But again, if we know the big picture of the story of Joseph, he handled it the right way. That he struggled with it a little bit, as we'll see, but in the end, he ended up seeing it wasn't you guys that hated me, and that it wasn't you guys that ended up bringing me here. Like, God turned your jealousy and your hatred into getting me to where I needed to be in God's will. Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
So that's very important for us to see, right? You know, where did Joseph's problems come from? Didn't come from God. God was the solution. The problems came from his dad, from his brothers, right? And maybe some from him. But throughout the story, where Joseph is presented as somebody who's a very righteous young man and a righteous older man. Might as well just point it out right now while we're talking about it. Not last week, but the last time you guys were a part of the class, we dove deep into the nature of man, right? So even though Joseph was a righteous young man, he was still a sinner. And in the grand scheme of things, even though these sufferings that are about to take place might not have been because of something God was punishing him for, but he still deserved it, right? What we saw last time is that the real question we should be asking is, why would any good come my way, right? If this is who I am, this is what God says about me, that we are sinful, right? We're born sinners. Even Joseph, he didn't deserve any better than this to happen.
It seems likely is God gave Joseph the favor.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Because he's getting blessed by his dad. And,
I'll be right back.
Yep.
Go ahead. I'm just gonna close the door.
He's getting blessed by his dad.
Yep.
God's got plans for him.
Yeah.
When you get the favor from God, God's got a plan for you.
Yeah.
And it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's really simple. When you get favor from the Lord or from God, you gotta be setting you up for something.
Yeah. Amen. All right, so let's look verse number 5. It says, "And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf," or worship. "And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words." So he dreams this dream where he was a sheaf standing upright, and all of his brothers were the other sheaves, and they're bowing down, worshiping him. So all that on top of how they already didn't like him, right? Then he has another dream, verse 9, and he told it to his brethren and said, "Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, "What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth?" and his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. So, you know, when I thought about this, the thing that jumped out to me was these dreams were from God.
Yep.
And so all Joseph was doing was just, he was acknowledging God. He was trying to follow God.
Mhm.
And what did it do? What happened?
Like
right?
he's supposed to.
Exactly. Yeah.
He was the chosen one.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of,
But
you know,
it's-
somebody, you know, finally deciding to go to church or to worship God, you know, to start following God, and all of a sudden problems happen because of it?
Well, that usually happens when people are jealous.
Yeah. Yep.
When people get jealous like that, which is a sin, it's in the Ten Commandments, it's a sin. And sometimes they want what you want and they can't get it and they despise you for it.
Mm-hmm.
But what you got to understand is your day's coming, because everybody's created by the Lord, and your day's coming when you will get a commandment to do God's work. So Joseph's got a commandment now to do God's work, and he's trying to figure it out, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
So once he figures it out, and he should have never told his brethren about it.
Mm-hmm.
He should have kept it to himself and figured out what God wants him to do.
Mm-hmm.
But he told it to his brethren, and then his father rebuked him, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as long as that's usually what happens when people don't love the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah. Hey guys, guess what? Guess what dream I had?
Yeah.
Michael, were you going to say something before?
I'm sorry, sir.
Were you going to say something before?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with your previous statement about it. You know,
Okay.
something in the church and then problems happen, you know, because that's the nature of life sometimes. When you try to follow the right path, a lot of distractions and, you know, tribulations are going to hit you harder because you're not heavily anchored in that sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Discipline, I guess, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really trying to just hone in on, you know, because, you know, Joseph, just like us, Joseph couldn't see the big picture with what was about to go down in his life, and what was happening. And it would have been difficult I'm sure he was hit with it and confused. Like, why is this stuff happening? You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm really just trying to focus in on to show where does our suffering come from, right? And we're seeing it here. It comes from people. It comes from our parents. It comes from our brothers. It comes from us, right? It comes from the world, right? The biggest mistake we can do is to say that it's coming from God, because the dream that God just gave to Joseph is what got him in trouble with people, but it was actually the beginning of God saving the world through him.
It's a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. So, all right, let's keep going. Verse 12. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem. Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here am I. Right? He's very responsive, obedient teenager, right? And he said unto him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. It doesn't say it, but I'm sure Jacob was, trying to make sure that his sons were not, being bad, right? He's using Joseph. Verse 15, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. When they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. So they decided to kill him, but Reuben was thinking, no, let's not kill him, just throw him into this pit, and later I'll come back without my brothers knowing, and I'll deliver him out. So what happened, verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, right? I think it's everything here is pointing to the fact that Joseph was good. These guys were just saturated with jealousy and hatred towards him. We learn later in the story that when they were regretting what they did, they talked about how much Joseph was like crying out, for pity and mercy while they were eating, while they're sitting there eating with him, like crying out, So this was this was bad. So verse 25, and they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. What I thought was interesting about this? Do you remember the story of Job? And remember when his I can't remember whether it was his camels or whatever, some of his sheep or whatever, the Ishmaelites came down, right? And we're going, I think it even says that they were going down to Egypt. There's something along those lines. Yeah. But it's the same idea. Who put it into God's heart for these Ishmaelites to come down?
It's part of the plan.
All right. It was a part of the plan. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, whether it was, it doesn't matter what happens, where it comes from on the earth. On the big grand scheme of things, God is over it all, right? So and this whole story, these guys are obviously not doing well either. The Ishmaelites, they're buying and selling slaves, right? So where are we at? Verse 26. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content.
They did him a favor.
Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. So let's see here. What ends up happening through the rest of the chapter. I'm going to definitely be summarizing because there's no way we'd be able to read through the whole story. But the rest of the chapter here is that the brothers go back home, and they killed a sheep and put blood all over it and tore the garment up. So basically they, put together the story. Joseph was tore apart by some beast. He's dead. That's how they ended up getting him, playing it off. Right. All right. Now, chapter number, we'll go to the last verse, 36. It says, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard. So that's where he ends up, and we'll get back to that. But chapter number 38, we're not going to read, but I just want to basically tell you the story. What it is Judah, the brother who wanted to sell Joseph into slavery, he ends up basically chapter 38 is my summary of the chapter. Is his life was messed up. He went and married a Canaanite, which was bad if you know the Bible. His sons are all dying, and then he eventually ended up his daughter-in-law became a prostitute that he went and committed prostitution with her and had children with her. I mean, it's basically, the story is basically showing that Judah's family life and his life was messed up. All right. And which is significant, I think, in the story of Joseph, just to show, why is this stuff happening? Why is this happening to Joseph and not to Judah, right? Because God has a plan. That's the big thing. God has a plan.
Always.
Okay, chapter 39, verse 1, it says, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hands, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored." We're getting more of the idea right here of how much of a righteous man Joseph was, how much he was doing the right thing. And yet here he is a slave, right? My first thought as I thought about this was kind of a relief, right? God was giving him some kind of a relief to the sufferings he was going through. But but it doesn't take long for the story to turn to where he's now going to be, if you're familiar with the story, he's going to be betrayed by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison. And the point is that it seemed like when things just started going good again, now he's thrown into the dungeon. All right. So we'll see that in a minute. So verse 7, "And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, 'Lie with me.'
Oh boy.
But he refused and said unto his master's wife, 'Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?'" So here we have Joseph being logical, right? Why in the world would I do this? I'm finally in a situation where things are going good, right? Why would I ruin all of this? But even more than that, he's thinking theologically, why would I do this? Is sin against God. Even if I wasn't caught, I can't do this against God. So here you have this. I mean, even at this point, Joseph could have been so bitter and would have said, "You know what? God gave me a dream, but who cares? There's no way that's going to happen. Not now." And he could have just,
Folded it up.
exactly ran with it, right?
Yeah.
But no, he's still. This will be the big word for tonight, Craig. Probably patience.
Yeah.
Patience, right? Joseph, he believed.
That's very hard to learn.
Yeah, and so here we go, right? Here's this temptation. So what happens? Verse 10, "It came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went in to the house to do his business, and there was none of the men in the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, 'Lie with me.' And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out."
Here comes a big lie again.
Again, remember, this is a 17, 18-year-old.
She lies.
So he's,
She lies.
he has great power now, right? It just said before, the master Potiphar, he didn't know anything that was going on, really. He trusted Joseph. I'm sure Potiphar's wife would have been willing to hide things, So, I mean, you're talking about a massive step of integrity right here. And if we thought that life was only sowing and reaping, right? That God does good to good people, and he does bad to bad people. That's a very shallow view of life, right? because bad things are about to happen to Joseph at a monumental act of godliness he's about to do, right? So we got to look at the big picture of things.
Doesn't she run out of the house saying that he raped me?
Yeah. So verse 13, and it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until her Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. So it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. All right, so Joseph is deceived and thrown into prison. And so, I was saying before that there was a temporary blessing, and I think that was a blessing from God for him to have some sort of purpose and relief being in Potiphar's house. Yeah. But then it was immediately taken away, and I think probably hit him like it was worse, Like if things start getting better and then all of a sudden it's worse again, it's discouraging, right?
It occurs all the time. When you have your own place and somebody else comes in and needs to stay there for a while, there's always something happening. Something's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And it never ends up as good. And that's exactly what happened to Joseph. You just can't go live with somebody and expect everything to go your way.
Okay.
Because sooner or later, the pot's going to come off the kettle, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And it never works out.
Right.
It never works out. I know, because I've done it. I've tried to help people before, and they didn't want to help with the rent and things like that. Right. And it caused a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of times when we try to help people,
you take it for granted.
Yeah, stuff can happen. So verse 21 through the end of the chapter is basically Joseph is thrown into prison, but God ends up putting him in charge of the prison.
Perfect.
Wow.
Verse 22, the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Right? The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper.
Yeah. But
so God is still leading him along, right? God is giving him a purpose, and it seems far away from what the dream was that God gave him. Yeah. But still, he's in prison.
He delivered. But he delivered him. Perfect. He delivered him, Lee. Mm. He's running a prison now.
Right.
He's got a job. He's got assignments. He's good.
He's in a dungeon too. Right.
But
all right. So what ends up happening next? I'll summarize this just for time's sake, but it's the story of the butler and the baker. Okay. So the butler and the baker are in prison with him. They have a dream, and Joseph is able to interpret the dream. Look at verse number 8. It says, and they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, listen to this, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. So Joseph is like Daniel. They were very careful to make sure that everybody knew that this ability, this gift was from God, right? Joseph was locked in to what God wanted to do with him. So the story is that the baker, his dream basically meant that in 3 days he was going to die, and the butler was that in 3 days he was going to be restored to his place again. But he said to them, he said to the butler, he said, when you get out, right, and you go back and you serve Pharaoh, make sure you please remember me, right? it was because of Joseph's goodness, right, that this guy was going to get out of prison, right? Please remember me. So
Joseph did all of this without being blessed.
yeah. But so look at the last verse.
Strong man.
So this is Genesis 40, verse 23. It says, "Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forget him." Right. So Joseph is continuing to do good. He's doing God's work, and no breakthrough. Right. I think it'd probably be about this time that Joseph would think to himself, God, where are you?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you gave me a dream that, these great things, but now I'm in the darkness, in the dungeon, right? And this is where we can be at sometimes, right? We can be in a place where everything that seemed like it was supposed to happen is not happening.
You know something, Lee? I got familiar with this story because I've been in jail and I was doing God's will, and I ended up going into jail for a month. I don't know why, because it was a false statement against me, and the judge said I was going to go to jail for 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So those 30 days, it really hurt me because I was innocent and I didn't do what was claimed against me.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned off of that. I said, this ain't right, but I know the Lord's got it because I always go to church. I've been going to church since I was 9 years old, and I always loved the Lord. And I didn't understand it because why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
God had a plan.
Yeah.
Here I am today in a new church.
Right.
And I like the church. God's got a plan for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing God's will. Everything worked out.
Yeah.
So it's like in the beginning, I was called when I was 23 years old. And God gave me a commandment. I did the commandment. And once I stopped, that wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I didn't understand.
Right.
I just thought it was, you wanted me to go do this and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it.
Right.
And I thought that was it. But there was more to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't follow through. So I lost God's favor.
Mm-hmm.
Bad things started to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was brought up in buildings where there was drugs and all of that stuff. And it was very difficult to stay away from them.
Mm-hmm.
So I got addicted to them because I didn't know any better.
Right.
So the whole time that I understand today, the whole time that was God was putting me through to make me stronger, to make me a stronger person.
Right.
So I can do his will that he has for me,
Right.
which is it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I've been doing it for a while, because it was new and I've been doing it for a while, it's very easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? His will for me, it's a part of something that I enjoy doing. It's a gift to me.
Mm-hmm.
I love to bowl. So I got a commandment to go and save the people that go out and bowl and grind. And I'm very good at what I do. And that's how God works with you.
Mm-hmm.
With your talent, with your good talent that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And he blesses you even more with it. And he gives you favor with the blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes simple. It becomes very simple and very normal to you. And you enjoy doing it. That's how God works with me. Mm-hmm. So I give him all the praise.
Right.
I give him all the glory.
Amen. Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think this is a good moment to park on this story, because I think this was probably the lowest part that he was, because from here it's going to start getting better.
Yeah.
But he is in a dark dungeon, having done nothing but good up until this point. And now even, seriously, like somebody who was in his shoes in prison and it was because of Joseph that he's getting out and he forgets him. Like, God, where are you? You know, like not even these people who I'm serving that were in prison with me remembered me. What is going on?
Yeah,
And that's the big thing right there, is when you're at that place, if you're just focusing on the situation that you're in, there's the only thing that's going to come is discouragement and misunderstanding. You're going to miss the whole point of why you're there, why you're in that place. Right.
I understand that very
and,
well.
I know you guys know this, but for anybody who might be watching too, that there's a promise in the Bible, Romans 8:28 says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. So if you don't know God, like if you don't know God and you're not serving him, like what Craig was just talking about, doing his will, everything is not working for your good. And if you're in a situation where it seems like things are falling apart, that's God trying to show you that in this world there's not truth, there's not hope. That's not where peace is found. It's God is trying to show you that the way you've been going and the people that you've been in, the way of the world, it's not leading to peace and joy and the purpose for why you're here, right? So know that like this story about Joseph and the promises that everything is working together for good. It's for the people who love God and are trying to serve him. They'll see in time how God is going to, like Joseph, God's going to take him out of this dark pit and use him in a wonderful way in the world. So maybe let me apply this to the Christians now, those that do love God, that if you do love him, he's going to use you in a great way. And the dark time, the trial, right now in a big way in the world, right?
It's going to happen.
He's preparing you. He's preparing us to serve him in a greater way.
Exactly. You got it.
All right. So let's move on to chapter 41. What happens in this chapter is Pharaoh now dreams, and Joseph gives him the interpretation of his dream. So it's in verse 1, it says, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. So Joseph was down there. The last thing he knew is he did something great for someone and they forgot him, right? Just sitting there, So Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. I'll just summarize the dream. His first dream was 7 fat cows coming up out of the Nile, and then there was 7 skinny, cows that were not healthy at all, and the 7 unhealthy cows devoured up the 7 fat cows, but they were still lean. They were still unhealthy. Then he had another dream where there was 7, good ears of corn, and then there was 7 shabby ears of corn, and the same thing happened, right? The bad ones ate the good ones, but they were still bad. All right. So Pharaoh has this dream. He doesn't know what it meant. He calls all of his magicians. They can't explain the dream. And then, let's see here. The butler, where did he say it? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Craig. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh, and he tells, Pharaoh is wroth with the servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. I remember this guy gave us this dream and told us what was going to happen. So Pharaoh, go call Joseph, right? So he calls him up, and verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And here we go. Look at this. Yep. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, and he goes on and tells him, okay, one of the things I want to point out about this, Joseph at this point could have been very thirsty and hungry for any way possible to take it into his own hands to get some kind of favor to get out of the situation that he was in, right? But what does he do? He puts it right back on God, right? He's like, if I help you, it's not me, it's God. Yep. So he wasn't looking for rewards. He wasn't trying to get out of the situation, right? This is a big deal.
Yeah.
And he tells Pharaoh the interpretation of the dream. The 7, there's first going to be 7 years of plenty, but then there's going to be 7 years of famine. And you had 2 dreams because it's from God, and it's going to shortly come to pass, right? And
Right.
so his advice to Pharaoh was, find somebody wise. And I don't think he was, trying to hint towards anything, but find somebody wise to, the 7 years, save up. So in the 7 years of famine, everything is good. And without asking for it, Pharaoh says to him, look at verse number 39. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. So Pharaoh ends up taking Joseph, puts his ring on him, just makes him second in command, gives him all of the riches, the authority. He ends up giving him a wife, right? And just the amazing promotion, the most amazing promotion that could ever happen that day. All right, something to think about. If you think about the timeline and the stream of events, would Joseph have been in the place where he would have been at to interpret Pharaoh's dream? Well, just go back one step while he was in the dungeon. If the butler would have remembered Joseph 2 years ago, Joseph probably would have gotten out, and perhaps he might not have even been in Egypt anymore, right?
Perhaps.
He would have had 2 years to go wherever God would have brought him to, right? Yeah. So,
yeah.
But if the thing didn't happen with Potiphar's wife, that he wouldn't have been in the prison.
In that situation.
That he wouldn't have been connected with the guy that connected him to Pharaoh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it goes all the way back, right? Yeah, you see that?
Wow.
So it goes all the way back, and we might not have the Bible written about our life. You know what I mean? We might not. Well, we won't, but we might not be able to see how, coming here connected me with Craig. But before that, how did I get connected to here? And you go all the way back. And it might not be good things, right? It might be unfortunate events that happen to you. I mean, these guys like Job and Joseph, and greater than all of them, Jesus. I mean, these are like extreme examples of men who were just like noted for their righteousness and their integrity, right? And look at all the stuff that they went through. So how much more, how much more people who are not, not all of us are the most exemplary, godly people in the earth, right? How much more us should we not expect that God is going to be doing things like this in our life to get us to where we need to go?
Yeah,
See what I'm saying?
What I boiled it down to is God's got a commandment for me, whether I like it or not. He wants to get it done, and he's going to get it done. So don't fight against it.
Yeah.
Get involved. You'll enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be the ride of the time of your life.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe. And because I was getting chastened, and the Lord will do that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because one of the things I want to point out about Joseph is, a lot of things happen to him, but what do we find him actually choosing to do? And he was serving, right?
Strong man.
He was serving. He wasn't bitter. He had the right attitude, and wherever he found himself, whether it was as a slave, as a prisoner, he made the best of it.
Yep.
And he worked, right? He served other people.
Yep.
So
He's got good at it.
yeah,
It's because of God's will.
yeah. So so let's jump now to chapter 42. Well, actually, let me just point out something. He had a couple kids, and look at verse 50. It says, "And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bare unto him as his wife. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." I just wanted to point that out because his spirit was still good.
Yeah.
He was recognizing things that had happened, but at the same time he was praising God for how he had led him along, and lifted him up and brought him out. All right.
Raising them.
Yeah, definitely. So chapter number 42, now we see Joseph's brothers show up in Egypt. All right, so verse 1, "Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt," so at the end of the previous chapter, there was a summary that the 7 years of plenty came and the years of famine came, and Joseph had stored up grain in the good years. All right, and there was famine now. So like now the problem had hit the world, right? And that brings us to 42. "Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do ye look one upon another? He said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. All right, here we go. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth.
Governor, huh?
Yeah, well, yeah, and here's the beginning of the promise, the dream.
There's the payoff.
Right, here's the dream,
There's the
that his
reward.
brothers are now bowing down to him. So the time frame was he was 17 when he was sold by his brothers. Then he was 30 years old, it had said, when Pharaoh dreamed his dream. And then there was the 7 years of plenty, and then they were at the point where there's 2 years of famine. So 17 to 30, and then 30. So he was about 39 years old now at this point. So from the dream to the answer, it was 20 years, about 20 years afterward.
That's a while to wait.
Yeah, it is. And to go through everything that he went through, right?
Yeah.
I came to New London in 2000, so I've been here 20 years. I know.
right.
I got a perplexion.
Mm-hmm.
I understand.
Right. So
I'm supposed to be here. I'm not in the wrong place.
Yeah.
I settled in. God gave me a gift. My rent's real cheap. I got a good place. What more can I ask for?
There you go. Yeah.
What more can I ask for?
Right.
And I enjoy doing the will of God. And I'm in a good place.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Except for I didn't get my check today.
Patience, Greg. So, all right, now think about this. I'd like to see what your thoughts are. All right, so God had a plan, and this goes all the way back to Abraham too, which would have been Joseph's great grandfather. He gave Abraham a promise, and he said that through him and through his descendants, that they would inherit the land of Canaan, and that God would work through them to bless all nations, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what we have here is God caused a worldwide famine to hit the earth.
Yeah. Again. That
had to happen. That kind of stuff had to happen to get Joseph to the point where his brothers would bow down to him. Like, not only was it this is the point I'm making, not only was it the personal things that happened to Joseph that was bad, but God also brought in the whole entire world, right, into suffering to get his plan done.
Okay.
All right, so now we can definitely start applying this to ourselves, right? God has a plan, right? And right now, I believe 100%, 110%, God has a specific plan, and that specific plan has to do with redemption. It has to do with God wanting to call people to himself. The first and foremost thing is not necessarily what he's doing with nations, what he's doing with families, what he's trying to do with anything in the world. It's about people's souls, and God's using this worldwide pandemic to get his specific purpose done. And when if we look at Jesus, that's what was happening. I mean, you look at the Romans, the history of the Jews, the time frame that Jesus was sent into the earth, all of the people that hated him, and it all was leading towards the cross. The cross was the centerpiece of God's will, right? And we'll just mention it right here, but Joseph is kind of like a picture of Jesus. I don't know if you ever thought of this before, but he was the Father's favorite son, right? Jesus was the father's favorite son. He was hated by his brothers. You know how much the Jews had jealousy of Jesus, right? And they wanted to get rid of him. Jesus went into prison, right? They put him into prison and finally to the cross. But then what ended up happening, just like Joseph was raised up out of the prison, set at the king's right hand to basically deliver the world, Jesus, is the greater fulfillment of being raised up out of the dead, out of the dungeon, the tomb, set at God's own right hand to bring salvation to the whole entire world. So, So God was working like the whole world around Joseph's life to get his plan done.
I agree.
We're so we're sheep, right? We're so small, and we can't see what he's doing. But when we see pictures like this and stories like this, it's to remind us we need to be humble, right? We need to be humble and say, God, as far as I can tell, you might be in a situation where it's like, I'm like Joseph right now. All I see is darkness and prison walls around me. And all I know is that my brothers hated me. My brothers hated me. The butler, he couldn't remember me. But if you're in that situation, remember this story. Remember the life of Jesus, right? God will bring it to pass, the good that he has planned. All right, so let's see here. Chapter 42. So his brothers come. I just want to point out again, look at verse number 21. It says, and they said one to another, we are very guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. Basically what happened was Joseph told his brothers, they said, no, you guys say you're coming to buy bread, but you're really coming as spies. He's like, you guys are spies. And he's like, I'll believe you if you go home and get your youngest brother and bring him to me. And so the brothers are guilty now about what they had done, right? I think that this was a temptation for Joseph right here, because he could have just killed them, right? His brothers, after what they did. But he was kind of I think what was happening was Joseph was going through a season of trying to figure out what he was supposed to do with his brothers.
I think he put the stuff that his brothers brought upon him, he put it to the side.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah. Do you guys remember? Do you remember the story of Job? That when Job was going through all of his sufferings, and his friends came, right? His friends that were there to comfort him, but they were really accusing him. One of the most amazing that there's this verse that's one of the most amazing verses in the Bible to me. after Job even spoke to God himself, it says he repented before God, but then it says when Job prayed for his friends, that was when the Lord turned his captivity. Like that's when he was healed. That's when everything was restored back to Job, when he prayed for his friends. And I think one of the big lessons from that is that whatever you're going through, to make sure that bitterness doesn't creep into your life.
Yeah.
It seems like just from ministering to people, so much of the time when people question God, like, God, where are you? Why is bad things happening to me? There's always like people involved. There's always something that somebody has done to them that they don't think that they deserve, whether it was in a marriage or from parents or friends or whatever. But one of the strongest things that you have to be able to redeem your suffering and to open the door for blessing is to kill bitterness, kill it, and say, you know what, whatever you have done to me, I forgive you. I'm a sinner just like you, and I know God has a plan out of this thing. That's the way out. That was the way out for Job, and it was a part of Joseph's story as well. What did Jesus do on the cross, right?
Right.
Father, forgive them. They don't know what they do.
When they started speaking,
forgive them.
When they started talking.
Yeah.
He pretty much, one of the guys told Jesus that, he said to him, so if you're the Lord King, not take yourself off the cross or something. He said something like that.
Yeah, they're mocking him.
It was mocking
him
big time.
Yeah. If you're the Savior, save yourself.
Yeah. The other person said, no, I will go with you, Jesus. I believe in you.
Yeah.
And the other one was with him. And he said that you will be with me. In
paradise, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if Joseph was like, begging God, like, get me out of this prison, What did I do? Get me out of here.
Yeah.
Well, like, he could have been resisting the will of God, right? Yeah. And so same way with Jesus, right? If he wanted to get down off the cross, I don't deserve this. Get me out of here. We wouldn't have wanted that, right? And a lot of times people, look at their situation and their problem. They're looking at their problem. And if your mindset is this is the problem, I need to get rid of this so I can do what, or experience what I should be experiencing or do what I'm supposed to be doing, you might be resisting the will of God, right? So God's will isn't, don't pray to get out of your problems. No. Pray that you would have the right heart and the right mindset through your problems.
Yeah, because in the Bible it says God already knows what's good for you, what's the best for you. Mm-hmm. So pretty much sets down a prayer.
Yeah.
It sets it down. It sets it down for a little bit.
Yeah.
Because God knows if you're saying a prayer that God doesn't agree with it, because He knows what's best for you. It says it in the Bible. Mm-hmm. He's not gonna return your prayer. Mm-hmm. But if it matches up with what He has in your plan, He will mm-hmm. give you the prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, he knows what we have need of before we ask him, right?
Exactly. Yeah. He knows. Because he's got a plan for us. He knows where we're going, mm-hmm. which direction he wants us to go.
Right.
So if we pray hard and get down the wrong street, he's not going to just
mm-hmm.
push to the side because he knows what's best for you. It says it in the Bible.
Right. Yeah. Amen. All right. So let's see here. So chapter 42, the brothers come down to Egypt. And then chapter 43, the brothers return back home. They have food with them. Joseph ended up putting their money back in the sacks. So they come back with food and the money, and now they're nervous about it, right? Like, oh no, So
what a guy, huh?
Yeah. So they so they come back. Let's see here. Just want to point out when they come back, verse 26. If you look, it says, and when Joseph came home, they brought him the present. So what happened was they came back again for food, and Joseph knew, and he said, "Come." He said, "Tell them to go to my house, and I'm going to eat with them." So now they bring the brothers in, and they're freaking out, right? Why does why does the governor want us to come to his house? You know, so they have gifts for him and everything. They're freaking out. So verse 26, when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house and bowed themselves to him to the earth. Again, seeing the fulfillment. It says, and he asked them of their welfare and said, is your father well, the old man of whom you spake, is he yet alive? And they answered, thy servant, our father, is in good health, he is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. I'm just pointing out these scriptures because God is fulfilling what he had said, right? So they end up, go ahead.
You see how Joseph override his brothers? Mm-hmm. That's God's work.
Yeah.
It just overrided them, and now he gave him back money. He didn't charge him for the corn or anything like that.
Yeah.
And they're back by more.
Right. Yep.
And he's probably going to give them. Probably got to do the same thing.
Yeah. What ends up happening? So let's just do some summarizing. So he ends up eating with them. He sends them away with lots of food, with the money again in their bags, and he ends up putting his silver cup in Benjamin's bag, right? And as they're going away, his Joseph's servant goes after them, finds them, and says, "Look at chapter 44. Look at verse number 4. It says, and when they were gone out of the city and not yet far off, Joseph said unto his steward, up, follow after the men, and when thou dost overtake them, say unto them," look at this. This is a big statement right here.
Yep. Sure.
Wherefore have you rewarded evil for good? And I think what was happening right here is that Joseph he's testing his brothers. Because they did evil to him, right? Yeah. By selling him into slavery. And now Joseph is only showing them good. Yeah. Right? And he's trying to get them to think, right? You know, why have you rewarded me evil for good that I've done to you? He definitely got them into a place where they were freaking out. I'm not sure if he knew exactly all of what he was doing, but he was definitely testing them. I think the big picture, finally, what happened was when I'll just summarize it right now. What ended up happening was finally he told them that they needed to bring Benjamin down to Egypt, which was Joseph's only whole brother. All the other brothers were half brothers. And when what happened with Benjamin was Judah was willing to actually go to prison in Benjamin's place, right? And I think at that point was when Joseph started revealing himself. And I think what it was Joseph finally knew that these guys had a real, genuine repentance. Like if Judah, the one who betrayed Joseph, if he's willing now to go to prison for Benjamin, for his brother, now I believe in them. So
you can see a little bit of a resemblance of what happened